I'm Decathlon Gamer. Welcome back to FM23, Newton Heath, and this is episode number 11. We wrapped up the season last time. Let's do a little more wrapping up of that season first before we move into the new one. And we'll take a look at what made the team successful, because ultimately that was a very successful campaign with a group of players that were only just good enough for the tier below. So how we not only escaped the drop, but also, ultimately finished mid-table was pretty dang interesting. But anyway, general performance. One thing that stands out is we had a high passing percentage, and we were fairly, in there. Shots per game was a bit low, but we were fairly consistent with league average otherwise. But breaking that down a little bit further, in the attack, you can see this is where we were good. We were good. Our shots per game wasn't necessarily higher than others, but we drew a lot of fouls. Our passing percentage, previously noted, was good. Our crossing percentage was very high. It was almost the highest in the league. And while it didn't lead to a ton of attempts, with a good shot percentage and enough creation, we bagged enough goals to have a fairly successful season. Tactically, we were making the right moves from the right positions, even with inferior players, essentially. Team defending, you could see our shortcomings, but you can also see, how we ultimately survived. Fouls per game, dead last in the league. We were awful. But the weird thing about it, statistically, that shouldn't have happened. I'm wondering if it was our crazy low, reputation. Sure, it rose by 100 points or something like that over the course of the year, or not quite 100 points from one out of 10,000. Now, league average for Vanarama National League, we're talking about 2,500 is a league average, or even just 2,000. So 2,000 to 2,500 out of 10,000. We now have a 100. So we're still close to 2,000 points behind everybody else in terms of reputation. It's going to take a long time to build that up and get somewhere regarding reputation, which means bringing players in is going to remain a difficulty. Even if we suddenly went semi-pro, a lot of players are just not going to be that interested. The good news is, before too long, we'll have the kind of finances that'll allow us to overpay and find success that way. Because you can always bring in somebody who's interested in green. They have that type of greed to accept a contract with a lesser team if you're going to pay them well enough. And at these lower levels, that shouldn't be that hard to do, to find some players that are willing to sign on for that, because everybody else is paying them barely anything, even if they have a better reputation. But anyway, that fouls per game being dead last. Conceded, just below league average. XG, just below league average. Clearances per game was actually slightly above. Blocks, slightly below. And interceptions, right about average. So across the board, those defensive stats are average. Even though we had players that were kind of less than, they still performed at an average rate. Importantly, our tackle percentage was average. Bang on. Average in the league. But our tackle attempts per game, while not last in the league, was well below league average. But they had an average percentage when it came to success rate. And this is why the fouls against, or the fouls for, was a bit of a head scratcher. Because if we only attempted at a quarter of the rate of everybody else in the league, meaning, it's not going to be a crazy margin, but let's say 5 attempts, right? That's not an accurate number. Let's round up a little higher. Let's use an example of 10. If we have 10 attempts is league average, and we're below that to the bottom quarter of the league, then let's say we're only attempting 8 tackles per match, and we're succeeding on 4 of those 8. It would be a higher percentage, right? More than 50%, but we'll use that as a, league average is 50%. These numbers don't necessarily matter. It's, kind of making a point. If everybody else attempts 10 and we're only attempting 8 and they succeed in 5, they are missing 5 tackles. We are only missing 4 tackles. So we're missing fewer tackles overall. Are we so bad that we miss them that horribly? We saw a lot of professional fouls in those early matches in the season. So, okay, there's a factor, right? We know that our yellow cards were through the roof. The fouls called against us were through the roof. Honestly, I think based on what I'm seeing there, with the tackle attempts being fewer, but the percentage still being bang on average with the league, I think the fouls per game was the referees being really harsh against us because we lack reputation. I think it has to be a factor. Were the missed tackles because we knew we were beat and, therefore you intentionally take somebody out? Or because the missed tackle by the center back leads to the fullback coming over to help, but not really being in a strong position, and you grab the guy by the arm and you pull him down and you give the automatic yellow for the professional foul. What it all amounts to, hard to say just from looking at this, but it does suggest that there's something deeper going on based on the fact that, we weren't terrible in our tackling percentage. And when you have fewer attempts, right, it's those tackles that lead to those fouls most of the time. By the way, I've fixed the logos around the clubs and competitions. Oddly, though, it's negated my logo in doing so, and I've gone in and fixed that, and it's still not updated. It's not fixing. So for some reason, I cannot get my logo back on the team. So Bradford Park, who I replaced, is our active logo at the moment. Just so you're aware, I will figure that out in time. But in the meantime, everybody else's logo is present and good. So at least that's taken care of. But anyway, this is our season review. New arrivals. Just a couple guys that did not play. One guy who barely played, but otherwise, our 21-man or 20-man roster that we finished, everybody, 17 anyway, played a lot. Guy who performed best actually came off the bench a lot of the time, and that is Eastman. That was one of those attacking midfielders, technically a center mid, and you can see he's clearly not as good, just a squad player, but has some pace and has a good first touch, makes good decisions, and is determined. That's kind of about it. And I think we've been playing him as that central attacking mid. He has 9 assists, so that was a creative force. And it showed you on the previous screen, maybe you had looked at it yourself, but a few areas that we were stronger was our goalkeeper. Played really well. Clayton, 39 appearances in the end for him. That seems like a lot because I didn't think he was with us that long. 6.9 average is not tremendous, but he was better than league average in a number of areas and a number of stats. He outperformed what was league average. So I think that was a really helpful piece for us, was bringing Clayton in. But other than that, the other standout individually on the pitch was our midfield and their creation. That was better than league average. And it looks like Eastman was definitely a huge factor for that, as he had our best rating and 9 assists. Brown Sterling, striker on top, 24 starts, 9 goals. Not a great rate, really, for a striker, but it's certainly not terrible. Ebanks was a definite winger. He ended up getting a lot of starts and did fairly well, even though he was not our best guy at the end. Andrew was back and forth between being either a winger or playing on top, And I think that kind of shows in a little more balanced goal rate and assist rate. I'm really surprised Sonny Graham played as much as he did, as he was actually one of the weakest players on the roster. But the assistant manager liked him and definitely picked him up. Tom Sams should have been replaced as a center back, but did enough and actually did okay to kind of keep his role. You can see him with Wilson ended up being kind of the main guys as the season went on, and Bale was our captain. Defensive mid, by the way, for him, so anchoring that D. Recap of the FA Cup. Started pretty well, but then Oldham in that fourth qualifying round, our third round competing in, we were able to draw, but then ended up getting hammered on the road and knocked out. Peterborough Sports knocked us out in literally the first competitive round for us, second round overall of the FA Trophy. Average home attendance, over 9,000. Obscure for the club reputation is going to be the same for a long time. It's going to take a really long time to get out of the place where we are at right now in terms of reputation. It's going to take a long time to come up, and we're definitely going to have to climb the ladder a little bit to even get to a reputation equivalent of the teams around us in this division. Sponsorship, broadcast, corporate hospitality brought in a lot of money, and that's going to be a big thing going forward as well. Competition prize money, very little. Match day commercial and retail, though, 1.3 million. That was huge, and we did ultimately come away with a slightly positive balance for this season. I have not tried to push the board as of yet to do anything, and that, as manager, is the greatest attribute that I have, is that determination, which is how you approach the board, how you can get things accomplished in regards to them. So we'll see before we get into next season if we can make something happen. I'm thinking maybe semi-pro would be a good way to go, because then we can actually start offering money, and even though that's going to come with a cost that we're not going to cover terribly well up front, that gets us to a higher caliber of player that we can sign and bring on. Or we go for something else and start building the long game, like, say, training facilities, that we can later on develop players a bit better. Kind of an iffy one, and then wait to pay players until we kind of get forced on it. The board might actually make that decision themselves, being that we are in this division and stable in this division, and everybody else at minimum is semi-pro. Here is that recap of kind of how we lined up, though. George got 34 starts. So there was Eastman, Ebanks, Andrew, Graham and Bale in the middle. Gamble was a real struggle for us, and Corrigan, neither one playing very well. The fullbacks, that was our biggest weakness this season. George, I could understand why he wasn't able to do as much. I mean, he ultimately scored 12 goals, but a lone striker on top on a weak side isn't going to get that many touches, therefore isn't going to have the highest of ratings. He bagged 12 goals. He got one every 3 matches and played his part in our success. But these were the creative forces that actually got the touches. They just couldn't feed the ball to him very well, especially if he's trying to beat 2 center backs. If he's drawing 2 players in and attracting more attention, that does make life a little easier on these guys behind him, especially if you have good fullbacks supporting that, giving you an overload. I don't think we had that overload very often, but I think George played his role. Wasn't terrible. Fullbacks, though, left a ton to be desired. And considering that our back end otherwise, at least through the middle, did okay, supporting each other, having 2 anchors in front really helps. Clayton won man of the match 5 times, so that really goes to show that he stepped up in a big way. And our highest passes completed per 90 was the center back, so you can see how we kind of built from the back fairly often. That gives you a little bit of time to set things up, and with a high cross completion percentage, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's the center backs setting up the wingers and getting that ball forward a little bit faster. Completing those passes frequently can really set up your offense pretty well. But George had 11 league goals. Novak was a big help after he came in late on. He only had four. He had 4 goals in a match. I don't know what his grand total was, but I'm pretty sure he replaced George by the end of the season as the go-to guy on top. Paddy Lacey, who got replaced partway through the season, 9 yellow cards and a red card in not so many appearances. And that was one of those defensive mids anchoring that D, slowing things down, stopping potential goals. In the team timeline, you can really see that this is all about the signings as we go through. The only other highlight besides signings was George setting the club record for scoring 12 times. Club vision, what they're looking for is repair financial damage. That's just because we have debt. Struggling on that one doesn't necessarily mean anything. We've actually been doing well in the finances department, but avoid relegation in the next season is the main goal. But after that, they want us to start work towards recording a top half finish. 3 years till we eventually get there at the end of the 27-28 season. So they really want us to work pretty slow at that one. But if there's optimism in growth within the club and not just avoid relegation, then I would think that the board at least has some ambition. Accomplishing some things might be on the easier side. Building an identity with a revolving door of players is really tough. By the end, we have 5 influential players and nothing beyond that. So that's a process that's going to take some time, and I think we're still going to have a bit of a revolving door, at least through this season, as we start to get that stadium in and see a big change in how we approach signings after that, or at least as soon as we hit semi-pro, I expect to see a pretty big change. Knowing that the target was to avoid relegation for the coming season, I'm gonna go with confident in avoiding that. And yes, the players are happy by that. That's good. The new assistant coach coming in, man management is a 7. Well, people management now. Preparing for the new release next year. Judging player ability, 8. Player potential is 10. Other stats aren't great, but that's what you get when you are literally paying someone nothing to come in and be your assistant coach. At least he's gegenpress, even though it's a 4-4-2. Promotion playoffs, Scarborough Athletic losing to Kidderminster and Gloucester beating Blythe 2-0. Big progress for Blythe, as they've constantly been at the bottom of the league. To see them climbing is kudos to them. Our under-18s, which of course have no players, and no one coming out of this youth intake is going to make that squad either. Just 2 wins, 6 draws, total of 12 points with a minus 56 goal differential. 1 match left to play, but it doesn't matter. They're not moving up from last place in the group. I didn't realize we had a 6-team playoff, but we do. That first game, Matt eliminated 2 teams that then go on to be the road teams against 2 higher seeded teams, and Field 3-1 over Kidderminster. Peterborough 1-0 over Gloucester makes your finals matchup for the second promotion spot. Whoever wins out of those 2 will join Spennymoor as the promoted side with 83 points, clearly best team in the league this season. I think now that we're heading into the off-season, it's a fantastic time to get started on a simple request, one that's not going to cost much at all and would probably get approved. We'll start with a coaching course. Club doesn't have the money. You get $800,000 in the bank. You can't spend $800 on a coaching course? Okay. And the league's top 2 teams are the ones that are going to be promoted after a 1-0 victory. I might as well run the gauntlet of asking the board for things now while our finances are fairly good, and otherwise we're going to sit on it until next January when we have the stadium and money starts rolling in. So we'll start with training facilities as the next one. That one's denied as well, but we'll continue running the gauntlet of options. Youth level's another one that we can push for. We'll see what we get. After that failed, we'll try junior coaching budget. Everything to start pushing in the right direction. I don't know how well we'll do, but these requests don't really hurt our chances of anything. One, we're waiting until January if these don't come together anyway. And two, we're in a situation where I can't offer you anything while you are on contract. Two, it'll build my attributes for making these attempts, right? The more you do something, the more it's going to make you better at doing it. That's rejected as well, but we'll keep trying. Next thing down the list, professional status is one of those options, or at least semi-pro status. Before we try that one, we'll do youth recruitment. It's all coming down to funding. They're not looking at our $600,000 as a positive. I think they're looking more at our, debt and loans, and the fact that we owe $48 million still. So that's a lot. That leaves us with professional status. That's the last one that I'm going to ask about until January. So we'll see if we get it. On this one, they're looking to stabilize our position in the pyramid first, as we are a relegation-threatened team. They're not worried about changing our status at this time. So that's something to keep an eye on going forward. Stabilize, and there's a good chance that they will approve that. Quick rundown of the leagues and how things have gone. Man City win the title yet again in the Premier League. United only 7th, with Newcastle making it a big 7 now. Villa and Southampton, the first ones looking on the outside. Leicester just surviving. Brighton, Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest going down. In the Championship, promotion playoff final still yet to play, but promotion already for Norwich and Watford. Reading, Wigan, Bristol City going down. In League One, Ipswich, Plymouth, Lincoln going up, with Burton, Accrington, Stanley, Forest Green, and Exeter going down. League Two has Bradford City, Northampton, Grimsby, and Leyton Orient going up, with Rochdale and Hartlepool going down. And Ryan and Rob have got their wish, with Wrexham crushing the Vanarama National League. They are leading in real life as well right now, though it's much closer. But there's a lot of season left to play. Solihull Moors, the other team seeing promotion, with Aldershot, Maidenhead, Maidstone, and Wealdstone going down. Wealdstone doing quite poorly in the league. Which two will end up in the north, I'm not sure off the top of my head where each of them are from. So we'll see. But two of those will be down with us. Here's how the south is going to change. This is our equivalent tier. Hampton and Richmond, with Havant and Waterlooville going up. And then Chestnut, Braintree, Taunton, and Welling heading down. Pretty close at the bottom. Hungerford kind of just beating out that group goal differential wise. They probably could have been a couple spots lower than they were. And I guess that's not Chestnut. That's got to be a recently promoted side in Cheshunt. Yeah, they had just come out of the lower tier. They were only there for a few years too. That had been 2 promotions in 4 years for them. Looked like the highest they had ever been, at least modern times anyway. Got it in 46, but semi-pro side hadn't been seen any higher anyway. They are going to yo-yo and head right back down. We had 2 older players on the roster. One of them, our vice captain, Calvin Andrew. He was signed initially as a striker, ended up playing as our left winger most of the season. He has decided to retire, so we're already down a man, down to 19 now. And without any change in status, what we're looking forward to with the season to come is kind of being in the same boat. And I don't know if we can get that snowball rolling uphill much more. Our latest evaluation of players actually shows that our top end guys are better players. These 4, 5, 6 guys at the top are good enough to play at this level, is how they're being seen now. I'd say, through about Kigbu are good enough to play at this level. Everybody else is still seen and recognized to be a player of that lower level. I guess he was our right wing At least in my eyes, he was our right wing. The way the season ended, with the team being decent, looking decent, getting results, you would expect that to carry into the new year, that we could be a mid-table team until January and money starts to roll in, and then things should hopefully start to look different soon after that. But that's not necessarily the case. I think we're ultimately going to find some more players. We have months to do so, but I don't expect to find a lot. I expect this to be mostly the roster entering next season. The downside is we can't pay these guys, and others can. And these better players are getting recognized, and I have a feeling that those top 6 guys, I would imagine 3, 4, 5 of them will be gone, possibly even by the start of the season, with other teams in the division offering them contracts. There's going to be expiring contracts out there, though, so there will be a new wave of players coming available. I have to check when those contracts end. Is it the end of July? I don't think it's that late. I think it might be the end of June, which is the end of May now, so we have a month to go until that period. New wave of free agents is absolutely our best opportunity to bring some players in, elevate the profile, and maybe as we had to kind of snowball up till we got to players, and then it was just who's not signed yet, a better group of players are going to be available, so that there could be an opportunity in there, and that's the next thing to look at. So maybe let's push forward to that, see if I can bring some quality players in on trial and maybe get some signings done. Though I do have that sneaky feeling that all or most of those at the same time are going to get offers throughout the league, and we're not going to get to sign too many of those guys. We might bag a few, but at the same time we might be losing what we have here. So it's going to be a tricky offseason. I really do feel this is going to be a tricky offseason where competition for signing names, including the guys that are on our roster as it is, we're going to lose out a lot. We're going to lose out a lot. And are we even going to have a decent roster to start the season? Or are we going to be back into a similar situation as last year, as we are picking up scraps and we've lost what we had? After just checking on it, our reputation has grown from a 1 to a 127. So like I said, about 100 points up from what it was. That is enough to be considered a significant increase. But where does that actually put us? Well, Man City now have the highest reputation. That took them a long, long time to get there, despite being essentially the best team in quite a while. But the reputation-wise, it was a long time coming to get there. But United all the way down to 4th. That hurts for them. Here's how we compare to other clubs in England, which of course is a huge, huge, huge list. We are still dead last in the recognizable divisions. No surprise by that one, at all. But where we stand relative to the grand scheme, there is a drag bar on the outer edge. That drag bar goes from the very top where Glapwell would be right now, all the way down to the very bottom where Midhurst is at the bottom of my screen. Everything in between there, you could break that down as a percentage of how far up that ladder you may be. Where we're hovering right now, since it's behind the face cam, Langford. Langford is where that bar is right now. So, 5th up off of bottom with, a good 30 to 40 still above it. I'd say that's about 30, just round numbers off the top of my head. So, what does that even put us up? 10, 15%, maybe. I'd say we're more than 10% of the way up. Definitely less than 20% of the way up the pyramid. in terms of reputation with what we have accomplished in one season. We'll see where we're at in a year, and especially if that money starts rolling in and we finish a little bit better, I would expect that next year should be a bit higher. I mean, remember, we had some really, really poor performances. So the yo-yo team that we talked about previously, when we were looking at the standings not so long ago, Cheshunt, either way, they are the next lowest. Now, of course, they're a one and done in the Vanarama National League South. They're going back down to the regional leagues. But they at least set the bar. Speaking of the bar, here is that little sidebar. This time you can actually see it. Here it is on the side. So all the way up at Belper, which is 8th from top, 7th from top. That is top quarter. That's the top quarter of the list. We are 85th percentile towards the bottom end, where they are 25th percentile. We've got a good 60% of the pyramid to cover just to get equivalent to those around us, just for reference on how bad that reputation is and how difficult, both as an amateur side who's not paying anyone and just generally reputation-wise, how bad we are at competing for the likes of any given player in the league. A couple days away from free agency. For one, we've already lost another player, but we have actually managed to sign another free agent thus far. So actually we lost 2 players, another retirement. So we're down to 18 right now, and you could see most of the roster is garnering attention around the league. So there's a lot of guys that look like they could be gone quite soon. I mean, we're talking about 18, and there's 16 names listed here. So we are potentially losing all but 2 of our existing roster. The only paid member we had of staff, the only existing member that came in when we started the series, was our general manager, who was making $30,000 a year. Everybody else was totally unpaid. His contract has expired. He was 3s and 2s in ability, potential, negotiating. Very, very low numbers. Now, hopefully, we are looking to bring in Dominic Knowles, who is a recent retiree from this level. And, I mean, look at that history of playing at this level. That's a lot of years at this level. And he's 8s and 9s, so big upgrade. And should be coming out ultimately for free. And sure enough, yes, that is amateur level, free. Will he sign? He does. That's a big coup for us. And that saves $30,000. Money we saved up over the year during the off season is going away without any home matches, but preseason is about to get underway. It's 1st of July, which means all of those expiring contracts have finally expired. We have a hopefully busy and active market coming. I've now added 2 players to the roster, Lewis Page and Joe Lynch. Either one looks to be amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but Lewis Page comes in as a pretty decent option. Good crossing for a fullback, something we have not had at the position, and good mental attributes as well. So I think he could be a pretty solid upgrade for us over Corrigan, who really did not do much for the team over the last year. And that would put him up over Midgley. And I have a feeling Midgley is going to be gone quite soon, as he was expected to be a star player, as he was the best at the time when we signed him, but he's far from that now. Day 1 of the hunt for free agents begins with a look at goalkeepers. I attempted to offer trials to 20-something of them, and we're going to eliminate a lot of them virtually right away on day 1, and then hang on to the others, wait for the attribute masking to kind of reveal itself just a bit. It looks like we've got maybe 5 candidates is all from the 20-something. I mean, this whole bottom end for sure, none of these guys are going to be good enough. So right away, freeing up 14 trial spots and leaving just a handful means I can go back in through the rest of the goalkeeper list, do the same thing, bring them in, and then, position by position, do exactly what we did a season ago. But again, the big difference is thanks to that uphill snowball thing, there's enough players. We're recruiting at a higher level than where we were at this time a year ago. That there's enough players with interest. A lot of these guys are players that just got released, expiring contracts within our own division, or somewhere around our own division, or maybe the division below, which means there's plenty of talented enough players. So expect a lot more competition for the signing of names this time around, like we were talking about a little bit ago. But this is something that is going to take a lot of work. I'm going to do a lot of off-screen work on this one, and our first preseason game is probably going to be about a week to 2 weeks from now. By that point, I would expect to have a lot more names, especially guys that we're kind of waiting on attribute masking to get revealed on, that might be playing in our upcoming friendly. We're starting at the back, working our way up forward through positions as we do that, so look for a lot of defenders around the first preseason game and the start of the next episode. That is going to do it for this one, though. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there. Bye for now.